My name is Con Leong, and I'm CEO and co-founder of ZL Technologies. We specialize in providing management of unstructured data. So today my talk is all about unstructured data, and primarily the problems relating to very large corporations, very large banks. So my apologies if that falls outside your area of interest. Unstructured data and very large financial institutions. We've been at it for 25 years, so I'm going to kind of scrunch that into 20 minutes. Incidentally, the nature of unstructured data is almost diabolically opposite that of structured data. So we've often had challenges where the re-education of unstructured comes in because everyone's used to structured data for the last 5 decades. Example would be the keeping of copies or proliferation of copies. In unstructured, that is an absolute no-no. So if you have 1 petabyte stashed inside Databricks or Snowflake, watch out. Your general counsel will probably take you outside and shoot you in the head. The other thing is also, worries about data lineage. We don't worry much about that because we know where all the data is coming from. Governance is different. So as I said, my remarks will be made upon all the experience we've had in the financial sector. We've had some of the biggest banks out there as customers for the last 2 decades, most of it. Citibank, Wells Fargo, JPMC, UBS, and so forth. So the lessons taken from those, the front lines over there. The nature of unstructured data is textual mostly, emails, files, collab, communicate, e-coms, Zoom, Slack, Teams, instant messaging, SMS, text, shared file systems, SharePoints, Bloomberg, social media, and the like. There's one funny thing about that. There's one commonality across all of that, and that is that it's all human. In case you want to check it out, it's 100% human generated. Very different from the ERP, SAP data, which is systems generated. And as such, since it's all human, created by humans for humans, if you already have the obligation for governance reasons to collect, index, manage, search, analyze, and so forth, you basically created organizational memory and knowledge for the first time. And that's also the reason why for the last couple of decades, anytime there's trouble, crisis, scandal, that's the first place that the regulators and the lawyers and the top management go to. You remember what happened in the Jan 6 insurrection? First thing they asked for is all the Secret Service texts. So if you look at the larger picture, if you have all of the data sources, email, phone calls, documents, and so on, and you're obliged to keep track of it anyway, it's an easy benefit to have all of these inferences on every human participant. Basically, you know everything there is to know about every human participant. Sometimes the algorithms may even highlight things that you may not know about yourself. There's often an argument, you're a procrastinator. No, I'm not. Let me show you the data. As you might guess, no less someone like Satya Nadella also opined on that, saying that the e-coms database is the biggest or most strategic database in the company. He's on the right track, but Microsoft's a little bit different. They focus on the desktop and department, but not the enterprise. And it's like building directories versus the city's white pages. Very different architecture. At the high level, 60,000 foot level, this is what unstructured data management looks like. Especially as it relates to GenAI. This is the ChatGPT type of formula where you operate on all of the open data out there. You train it. Of course, you have oodles of money and time, like Google. And then you generate billions and billions of these rule sets. But for the enterprise, it's very different. Number one, you don't have hundreds of thousands of volunteers to train the data. Number two, you don't have the money to invest in 100,000 servers. And number three, they don't want to touch public GPT with a barge pole. So they want it all in-house. And that makes a huge challenge because unbeknownst to many of us, the amount of data, unstructured data in the typical big bank rivals that of Google. If you remember when it went public, it had 4 billion documents to manage. Google did. At a big bank, the document count can easily be 50 to 100 billion. So to do all of that is one heck of a technical challenge. So in order to not only govern it, but also data wrangle it, you need to scale to tens of petabytes. The second aspect of creating this platform for data management is that you now can contextualize all the rule sets to the enterprise data and then combine it with some of the open source insights and get to a combined insight. The second aspect is governance. This actually is not well understood by the folks from the structured side because the headaches of doing the governance, like e-discovery, litigation, compliance, surveillance, monitoring, to have a records life cycle, to have privacy, all of that is not well known to the hyperscalers because these are tough problems. Took us 25 years to get here. And you also have to have a simultaneous resolution. You can't solve it in silos one by one. They have to be solved simultaneously. The governance part is really problematic. I won't go into the details, but quite often these are at odds with each other, and you will have various guardians inside your company. Legal says keep less. The analytics department says keep more data. So you have this food fight all the time. And typically you need to convene, how shall I say, a data committee to resolve them. But on the plus side, these also provide, I hear a lot of buzz about guardrails for AI. Well, these are your guardrails with a slight difference. The guardrails I hear about are some things like, hey, let's have some rule sets for the algorithms, what they do, objective functions and all of that. Let's mandate that it cannot do this or that. I don't think that's going to work. Not so well. You can have an edict that says, thou shalt not kill, which will be thrown out the window the first time they make robot soldiers. But if you apply guardrails also on the data, that becomes a little bit more manageable. So you restrict algorithms, you may be restricting, let's say, gun sales. You control data, you're restricting the sale of bullets. Might be a lot easier. If I take away all the privacy data, you can do all the algorithms you want, but the damage is somewhat limited. There's one last thing I'd like to say about governance, and that also limits how much you can use AI. And that's something that's not obvious. You cannot use the latest and greatest AI for some key aspects of governance. Why? It will not be accepted. Why? Because often the two parties across the table don't trust each other. GenAI is a black box. No one can explain how it got there. Imagine you're fighting the other side on a lawsuit, and it says, I want this produced. And he says, okay, here it is. How'd you get there? We used our GenAI. Explain it? Oh, we can't explain it. I don't think anyone will accept that. So it has to be a mix of old and new. All AI will not cut it. That's another aspect of governance that you have to keep in mind in unstructured. Now, on top of this, we're constantly coming across new challenges in applying GenAI. For example, how do you make GenAI forget something? How do you untrain GenAI? I don't think there's an elegant solution yet. Because GenAI is like dropping some blood into the swimming pool. It just permeates the pool. You can't drag it out. So what do? Because you are obliged to make GenAI forget, such as GDPR, the right to be forgotten. And that is a sticky point right now. There are various options that we're working on. For example, before I get there, I'll get to it in the next slide, how to make GenAI forget. But there's a third thing that is being asked for, and that is this humongous amount of data, which is in the tens of petabytes. How do you even handle it? Never mind pay for it. Because we're talking about petabytes and tens of petabytes. And if you compute that, last one I tried to compute for a company was 77 petabytes. When I showed them the bill, they said, never mind. We'll keep it on the ground. So there's a third one that kicks in, which says, hey, why don't we virtualize the whole thing? Virtualize means extract every ounce of intelligence you can from it, but do not keep the original. That actually has a magnificent benefit in 3 ways. Number one, you reduce the cost by 90% because there's no original document. Number two, you reduce the risk, the legal risk, and your GC will bless you for it, your general counsel. And lastly, this was a bonus. If you can get to analytics without going for the original document, without going to Microsoft and say, pretty please, can I have these 5 million documents from your 365? You can now speed up your time to data by 1,000 times. That's a 1,000-fold plus increase. That changes the expectations of analytics. If you wanted 5 million, we could probably pump it out within the hour. If you have to drag the original documents out of 365, that could take weeks, if not months. So I was talking about untraining GenAI because you have to make it forget for regulations like GDPR. One possibility is to actually not build it like one monolithic picture. but break it up into a jigsaw puzzle with tens of thousands of pieces that make sense, and then replace them as needed. Effectively, you've forgotten the old data. This, of course, would call on RAG big time. Retrieval Augmented Generative AI. If you want to take a look at a closer look at what our platform might look like, this is how it looks. Every analytics is a sandbox today. Some big, some small. Every analytics paradigm is a sandbox. From Palantir to Hadoop to Watson. The sandboxes have some intrinsic issues, such as, number one, it's a guessing game, a sampling game. You'll never get rid of the sampling errors. Number two, it's a pretty burdensome and wasteful process because 90% of your labor is wasted in scrubbing data. And of course, the long delays. The last one is new. There's no governance in analytics today. No one's really watching over. There's no oversight. Hey, wait a second, no legal contracts in there. No IP engineering documents in there. And no HR document reviews there. Right now, it's a free-for-all. It's the Wild West. It cannot continue. So what's the alternative? Well, how about we just forget the sandbox, do the beach? It's a little bit of a shock to the system, but since we've been doing 25 years of beach data, this is, I think, the only way to get to it. Because in doing the beach, you immediately solve the sampling error. There's no sample. There's no scrubbing issue because it's all prep for governance. And there's full governance with e-discovery, compliance, records, privacy, all built in. Of course, if you were looking at the sandbox to produce something that you're looking for, like a certain type of seashell, you guess, and maybe you'll get some shells, maybe it'll satisfy you. But if you scour the entire beach, this is what you might end up with. That's literally what's happened to us when we use this for our legal cases. But if you look at this, you say, you know what, this is a huge undertaking. I have to carton 20,000 tons of sand. Maybe not. Number one, virtualize the beach. And secondly, start small. Start small as in, there was a 120,000 person company that says, we have a problem with patent infringement lawsuits. Okay, just take instead of the 120,000 people, just take the US R&D and the one in New York doing product management and the European R&D, roughly about 2,500 people. Suck that data into the cloud, make it virtual, and then feed into all of your e-discovery, investigations, privacy, and what have you. That can be stood up within a week. And then if you like that, then you do all the rest of it as in expand to other data. That's how you usually get to the beach. And if you want to see what this is going to lead to, it massively going to affect every company. These are some of the early cases, and it ranges anything that touches humans is fair game. For example, it can solve things that we never thought possible, such as, who are my top performers? You don't need McKinsey for it. Or take the same thing and say, here's my influence graph. Let's flip it upside down and take the folks in the edges, and there's your ESG. And this is available at any time. You just click the button, you got your latest report. So I'll just finish up with a top-level diagram, which is take all of the unstructured data, do all of your GRC obligations, and then feed that combine it into a unified platform, and feed it to your data and analytics. These are some of the capabilities that our clients asked for. All 5 are still unique in the marketplace, but I won't go into that for now. And basically, the next stage is, we can take a page from Hollywood. They usually think ahead. This is from the Minority Report. We're going to get there very soon when we combine structured and unstructured data. And I suspect that'll happen in the next 3 to 5 years, where you just combine data any which way you want. These are the data trends you should watch out for. The 4, combining of structured and unstructured, moving from the sandbox to the beach, virtual data management, and combining analytics and governance. And my last slide here is to summarize what I covered. That unstructured data management is coming in big time. You would be hard put to ignore it, but you need the governance and you need to perfect the data feed to GenAI. But at the same time, meet your governance obligations because you don't have a choice, and then virtualize everything to reduce your cost and risk. Okay, that concludes my presentation.